Good morning, everybody. My name is Melvin Escudero. I am the chairman of the Advocacy Council for Latin America and the Caribbean markets at the CFA Institute. It's a great pleasure for me to have you again in this webinar format, working with all these countries to help a more inclusive markets that have more women professionals working in our industry, financial sector, including banks, insurance companies, pension funds, mutual funds, broker-dealers. As you know, there is a very important challenge to incorporate more women professionals on these areas. CFA societies in the region are fully committed to work and help on this process. First, we will have a initial presentation, a keynote presentation from Sarah Maynard, who is the Global Senior Head, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the CFA Institute, followed by a panel of comments and opportunities and risk for women in investment management that is composed by professionals from Chile, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, and Argentina. Finally, we will have also the closing words from a representative of the CFA Institute. We are very proud in the societies of working on these issues and helping to improve our industries with the societies of Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Uruguay, Jamaica, Bermuda, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, Cayman Island, the Bahamas, and Peru. So we are very proud again to do this in annual basis each year, and we will continue in this effort working for a more inclusive industry for women. Let's start now with Sarah Maynard's presentation and welcome all of you to this webinar. Go ahead, Sarah, please.
Melvin, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all today. So what I'm going to do now is just set up my screen. There we go. And just walk through really what we've been doing, how we're thinking about this work, and the ways in which we really want to make sure that this work is regionally, fully adapted, relevant, and actually really helps to drive inclusion and indeed better outcomes in the investment industry in the region. So it's just thinking onto our next slide. The way I want to set the scene very briefly is really to give you a sense of how we think about this work, because inclusion that perhaps lifts up one group and doesn't bring up everybody together is really not at all the whole point of inclusion. So just to give that cultural context, I wanted to think about this as a really an area for growth, of growth mindset and of opportunity. And essentially what we're trying to do is present the industry with both a real challenge, but also support. And at the nexus of support and challenge comes growth. And that's something that we see as being critical in terms of how we serve the industry and how that industry serves the end society in wherever we are in the world, because not least this is something that's a global challenge, and indeed when we think about gender, it's certainly where across the industry, and I'll share some slides in a second, we know that this is a huge challenge for our industry, much more so than some others. So working for the ultimate benefit of society is the key point. In terms of what we're solving for, and Melvin's kind of started off thinking about that, we know when we think about a whole range of measures, and the UN Global Compact report's a good place to start, but when we think about measures in which women, who are after all more than half the world's population, are not really fully involved, that has huge ramifications for society as a whole. So just looking at those kind of measures, we can see there's the opportunity and there indeed is the challenge. And not least actually changing that 151 years to close the gap, moving it forward much, much faster than that. When we think about the investment industry in financialized economies, of course, finance just has a huge role to play, both within their own individual organizations and in terms of investment policy and the like. So it matters, therefore, that this is an industry that's not yet itself as inclusive as it needs to be. And you can see that, and this is just a snapshot of some markets when we think about the work we need to do globally. So you will typically see much better workplace rates across labour force as a whole when you use the prism of the LinkedIn data on financial services. It comes down when we think about CFA, and then we start to focus in on the investment industry proper. You'll see the numbers are even lower. So this is, a problem everywhere in the world, and we were just chatting about this before we got started. This is absolutely something that we have to all tackle in our own way that seems most appropriate culturally, regulatory, and legally in each individual market. When we think also about how that manifests itself in terms of responsibilities, the risk of there being that sort of one or two women in a room is huge, and particularly when you start to go more senior, then you really do see how very much underrepresented the gender is in this industry. And if you bear in mind that we can't even get to a 50% mark on this chart, we're actually only going from 0 to 35%. So that gives you some sense of how far we have to go. When we think about then what we can do together to actually change this and move this forward, I think we have to anchor the work in an area that actually feels fully relevant to the day job. We're not saying this is a side issue, this is something for everybody, and it is actually designed to make the industry a better place to work, and to that ultimate benefit of society, achieve better investment outcomes. And some of this is wanting to frame the work in the vast challenges that multiple economies and indeed our industry has to grapple with as we come out of a period of quantitative easing into quantitative tightening, and the implications that has for markets and how change can be financed. When we think about the technological challenges that we're all deep in amongst at the moment, and then we think about huge things like climate change. So all of those things really need to have the whole, the whole available talent incorporated in those discussions. So that means that has to be, across the piece, whether you think about gender or indeed other measures of diversity. So inclusion is actually a way of making the overall work better, more suited to problem solving, and more relevant to those folks who are outside this industry looking in and wondering what it's doing for them. So all this to say, there is an opportunity here that we think is hugely important, empowering, but absolutely takes action. Where I wanted to start with getting into the sort of detail, perhaps, is just by defining what do we mean by diversity, by equity and inclusion. So we've set out here what those, how we define those things. And I think it's important that we understand that these are separate concepts. For convenience, they're often sort of mashed together as diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, but they are distinct, and therefore it's worth sort of taking that to heart before we dive into the depth of the work. I would say that as an industry, and this is a global piece, talking about diversity has been something that's been happening for decades. Inclusion, which is very much about the action piece, is starting to become more normal, but equity is still somewhat trailing. So that sense of, do we understand about how we eliminate barriers, how we leverage difference in such a way as to recognize that some folks will start at a disadvantage but are equally talented with those who maybe have had an easier ride earlier in their lives. So there's lots of different ways of thinking about this, but as I say, these are sort of key concepts I wanted to share with you at the outset. And I will also say that we will be sharing these slides, and we can make those available to our audience and anyone else who's interested afterwards. So hopefully that helps with any possible note taking or wanting to revisit any of those concepts at a later stage. The work that we do is very much, as you might expect, research-based at CFA Institute, and our experimental partner program, which we ran for 2 years with 41 different entities, something like 26 trillion of assets under management represented amongst a group that included consultants, asset owners, data providers, and of course asset managers. And what we saw amongst that group who had chosen to particularly focus on improving DEI within their organizations was that a shift going on in the ownership. And this was sort of the overarching piece, that essentially the leaders of the business were really seeing this as fully relevant. And to that slide where I was looking at the different challenges that the industry faces, the recognition that greater DEI is actually something to improve business outcomes was one of the overarching pieces of evidence we saw that came out of this research. And so essentially at the end of 2 years of working on DEI programs, of seeing the benefits, 93% of those organizations in that program said that they were prioritizing DEI for business reasons. And that, I think, has a powerful piece. Now, they were also doing it, I think, because of ideological reasons, in the sense of they could see the value of it, something they wanted to be doing, as I say, self-selected group, but seeing that ability to do good while doing well really can come together, I think is very powerful. So the key things that these organizations found was that, leadership and governance matters. They needed to have a clear mission. Communication, both internal and external, was vital. And of course, the measurement and transparency piece, which is holding them to account. So this was essentially the research that we did with this very dynamic group, many of whom are still very much involved in the work that we're doing across multiple markets. Now, out of this, we built our diversity, equity and inclusion code, which we initially have launched in the US and Canada, but we will very much be taking out region by region to build into a global code. But the way I wanted to share this with you is to think about what we already do in the codes and standards space. So as many of you will know, we have GIPS, we have the Asset Manager Code, and more recently the ESG Disclosure Standard. We also, of course, have our Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. And so what we wanted to do was really provide the language which links how an individual CFA member might think about that commitment on the codes and standards in terms of professional conduct. How does that then chime with a DEI code, which is targeted at organizations, at employers? And so the piece in the middle really gives you that connective tissue, so that essentially what we're saying is that we are looking for our members to be supportive of this work with their organizations, that they are part of that work with their employers. It's something that we see as being entirely consistent because it's designed to achieve better investment outcomes. So that sort of gives you a sense of the structure. In terms of what indeed the DEI code is, so this is the kind of what, who, how, when piece that I really wanted to get into with you all, because it, to a large extent, frames the work that we are doing and essentially gives you some sort of insights into the methodology that we've chosen to pursue. So we've taken the idea of a principles-based code, which we've seen in our other work, like, for example, the Asset Manager Code, and really try to provide a framework because this is right in the weeds of the messy business of human nature, how organizations work and how they find and create structures to grow their organizations, to drive talent and talent development, to attract, to retain, all those important fundamental things that are very much part of the day job. But to, as I say, to provide a structure to think about how DEI is relevant across all of these key pillars, or indeed principles, as we framed it. So we think about pipeline as a very collaborative space where we're really trying to pull far more, for example, gender representation into the industry and make sure that people can see a way to succeed in an industry that may be, from the outside at any rate, not look very much like them. That we understand essentially the processes that need to go into talent acquisition, the opportunity around promotion and retention, and that means really finding opportunities for progression at a micro level as well as a macro level. So what are the sort of stretch assignments that maybe could be more equitably distributed, not just about the business of moving from one role to another. Leadership is something where we see there's an opportunity for everyone. Of course, it matters enormously that the C-suite are fully signed up to this, but then there's also an opportunity there for everybody to be doing this work and to creating a more inclusive atmosphere and working conditions within their own organizations. We all have our own part to play. Influence, I might have touched on that with what I was sharing about that broader economic empowerment piece, because as I say, this is an industry that really has huge impact in the wider world, not just within financial services. And then, of course, measurement, as you might expect in a very data-led industry, we absolutely have to hold ourselves to account. So the DEI code really requires signatories to commit to sharing their employee data, how those employees identify, what the distribution is, particularly for investment in business teams, as well as the sort of wider support functions as well. So essentially what we're really seeing is ways of holding the industry to account, but also realistically to meet organizations where they are and to, as I say, to provide that mix between support and challenge to really see the growth come through. We will be reporting on what we find, and I will come on to that in a bit more detail in a minute. And of course, I mentioned earlier that business case that the experimental partner program participants really got very much behind, but we do need to make that economic business case and indeed a moral case for DEI so that people are clear why we're doing it. It is inclusive, it's not intended to benefit one group at the expense of another, because that's where the power of inclusion really comes into play. So there is no sense of one side being a loser in order for others to gain. It's actually, as I say, really about the whole industry benefiting and the end client, of course, most of all. When we think about what's the sort of minimum ask we have of our signatories, the way we have framed it, again, we're very much referencing the research we did and understanding what we know actually delivers change within organizations, because this work is about a culture shift within individual organizations. And over time, we hope that to then amplify out across the industry, market by market. So starting with adopting a policy and really exploring, well, what do these concepts mean to your organization, making that relevant, taking ownership, then establishing that leadership piece. And that can also, of course, be within firms, within a DEI council, within employee resource groups. There are lots of different ways of thinking about it, but it really matters that there is that core leadership and governance in place. And then the practical piece is an implementation plan. Might seem terribly obvious, but actually it's amazing how often you find that those are not really fully developed. So something that we know makes a real difference. And again, part of holding to account and focusing in on what matters to individual signatories, rather than saying you have to do everything all at once, which becomes enormous, too daunting, and frankly unlikely to be actioned. It's focusing on what makes the most sense for this business at this time in this market. And then, as I say, there is real ownership and understanding of what everyone is trying to achieve together. So just focus on who's signed so far, and this is just since February of 22. We're up just about shy of 140 signatories, and this is A to I here on the first slide, and there were some names that some of you will definitely be familiar with, some much smaller. So really a big range, I would say, of signatories that have come on board, from the very large entities to the really small, to the startups. It's consultants, asset owners. There are some VC and PE firms at the seed capital stage. So it's turned out to be something that clearly feels relevant to a very wide range of organizations. And that, I think, has power in and of itself, because when you bring people together, and one of the things signatories keep telling me is they really are keen to get together to discuss what's working, what's not working, where there is possibility for collaboration, where there is even a useful conversation, for example, with the asset owners in the group, talking to some of the startup firms. There are all sorts of interesting implications that are kind of growing out of this community that we're forming. And let's say that's just in 2 markets. So far, we're about 10% of global AUM. So you can tell that the level of the aspiration, I think, is very high. Now, when we think about why they've signed up, and it's always interesting to understand why folks do things and why they make the choices that they do. And this gives you a summary of the kinds of points, and some of these would be not at all surprising, like the clients are asking asset managers to make a commitment. But I think it's also nice to see that there are a very distinct group who are saying, we're fearful of diversity washing. We don't want to be accused of that. We want genuinely to achieve change. So we quite want to be part of something which does hold us to account. So that having to report piece is seen as being valuable. The possibility of actually getting some sort of benchmarking amongst different firms of different sizes, that's seen as really quite important. And also we're hearing it from CFAs themselves who are actually asking leadership teams to get involved because they've heard about it and maybe their leadership team hadn't previously. So there are all sorts of different ways in which these conversations are coming together, all of which are valuable and all of which I think present a huge opportunity to drive real change. What's coming up next is, of course, that rollout. Now, when we started this work, our codes and standards are typically global. They're global from the get-go, and then that's sort of how they land. This one has been very different because we've been very clear that they absolutely can be based on a universal model, as in the principles are universal, but the regional adaptation really matters, and local nuance at a market level also really matters. So this is something that we'll build into a global code, but we're very much doing this work with CFA societies. And so that is really very important in terms of the teamwork, in terms of, as I say, that local nuance and understanding and relevance. The UK group are coming to the end of the sort of first phase of their work, and we hope to have a UK code ready for market this summer. Europe by the end of this year, and Australia and New Zealand will be starting the work this summer. And I had a great conversation, as it happens, this morning with Singapore and what they're planning there, likely with other colleagues across ASEAN markets. We're starting this conversation today for Latam and Caribbean, and of course the opportunity to work with CFA societies in your region is really important, and we will definitely be taking that conversation forward. And again, conversations with China and Hong Kong SAR, with colleagues in India, who I also spoke to earlier today, my time, and indeed with MENA, and where I had a similar sort of conversation and presentation just a month or so ago. So all this to say, there is a lot happening. It's a little bit of a watch this space, but I think all the more valuable for that. So I'm enormously grateful to all my CFA society partners for the work that they and we will all be doing together over the next year or so. This is not just the whole extent of our work. This gives you perhaps a sense of some of the other things we have running. I would definitely want to do a shout out for colleagues in Brazil with the Young Women in Investment program there, which has just been superb, and they're such a pleasure to work with. So much more to come, I think, and as I say, no shortage of aspiration. Clear understanding this is hard work that we value, but most of all we value doing it, as I say, region by region, working with our local experts on the ground. So thank you so much for listening. I will stop there and hand over to the next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning all. I'm Hugh Miller, Head of Asset Management at Jane Fund Managers in Jamaica, and I'm also the Vice Chairman of the Advocacy Council for the Caribbean and Latin America. We thank Sarah, who is a globally recognized trailblazer, for giving us Safe Institute perspective on this whole important issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which impacts countries and companies in a material way. We also thank Sarah for just pointing us to the way forward. Let's give the imperative of achieving meaningful progress in Caribbean and Latin America in the next 3 to 5 years. As we transition to the next segment, I'll be the moderator for your panel discussion. And so without any further delay, I'm pleased to introduce to you our distinguished panel of women who have made a significant impact in the investment management industry, within Latin America and the Caribbean. And we will, in terms of how we'll proceed, we will ask each panelist to make a brief presentation, after which we'll open the floor for questions. So we ask that you just place your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get as many of them as possible. And so today you'll be hearing from Chile, from Mexico, from Trinidad and Tobago, and Argentina. And so without any further delay, it gives me great pleasure in introducing our first panelist, Mabel Weber. Mabel is the head of Latam Equities. She's a portfolio manager at BIC Inversiones in Chile, where she manages approximately US 200 million of small cap Chilean equities. And she's also in charge of Latam and Caribbean and Chilean equity strategies. Prior to this role, Mabel worked as a portfolio manager as well as a sell-side analyst at BIC Inversiones for 6 years. 1 year, she also worked as an M&A analyst, and there's another 2 years for which she worked as an investment analyst. Mabel received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. And of course, she graduated with honors. She completed her master's degree in finance at London Business School. So without any further delay, I give you Mabel. Mabel, take it away. And you're muted.
Thank you, Hugh. I will just share my screen.
Sure.
I don't know if you can just look at that. Is it okay? Yeah, good. Oh, no. So first, I want to thank the CFA Society Peru and all the participants from other CFA societies of Latam and Caribbean for this opportunity. Mabel Weber, and as Hugh mentioned, I have more than 15 years experience in investment roles in Chile. And in a few slides, I want to share where are we in women participation and what opportunities we can have to engage more women in the industry. All this from my experience. So first, this is a study from Women in the Workplace from McKinsey. It's 2022 study, and it shows gender representation by level in all corporate America. And what strikes from this graph is still the underrepresentation we have in women clearly women still are significantly underrepresented in leadership. This is all corporate America, but when we go into other industry, into asset managers or banking, we still see that we relatively attract more talent in the first entry levels, but still we are fairly underrepresented when we went to a more advanced and middle management or senior leadership. What happened in local markets? We have little or specific data in the region, especially for the industry as finance or even in investment management. We can see board members in the OECD countries. I have the number for Chile. And still it's pretty low. It's 15% women in board members, and it compares with all the OECD countries, and we are in a little low position. We believe we are underrepresented, as the other studies shows. From my position, when I just started finance as a trainee investment, I was quickly shocked to see the proportion of men and women. Only 1 woman work in the risk team out of 5. Only 1 woman work in the trade desk out of 20. So it was these 2 girls, the secretary and myself. This is only an example for 20 years ago, but still, when we look into this in the graph below, there's a little sample of in the industry, the finance industry that has banking and insurance companies in Chile. And we can still see that even women were made up in the black line as more than the 50% of the workplace, of the workforce, in the C-level or in the board member, that is the red line, and the C-level, that is the purple line, we're still fairly underrepresented with 24 or 21% of the board or the C-level being women. So my first thought about this is that we need to have, we are growing in the number of women, but we need to have more data to see if this can be managed. I know you have heard about the phrase, if you can measure it, you can manage it. So the first message is we need to start measuring the participation of women for everybody to know, especially in our industry. I have the recommendation of the Decalogue of Good Practice to promote participation of women in the financial sector in Chile. And the first recommendation is essential to establish indicators that provide a diagnosis of organization and thus be able to identify the challenge that still persists. We don't have many data of the investment management industry, women participation, and especially we don't have that data in Chile. So here is what I told you about the Decalogue of Good Practice to promote the participation of women in financial sector in Chile. I just told you where we are with numbers, and now this is an answer of what we can do. This Decalogue is a document that is the result of the public and private roundtable, where 26 companies and organizations alliance with the Ministry of Women and Equity Gender of Chile and Mujeres in Finanzas. And it seeks to increase the participation of women in financial industry at all levels and in all areas, not only in investment management. But I think that these recommendations work really good and they're really fresh. It's just the 2022 report. These are all 10 concrete actions that the industry and finance can continue to do to advance into gender equality. And as Sarah told us, there's a lot to do, and we have to focus on very specific actions to continue growing. So I will focus on number 5. And I think what we can do, and what in my experience I've been doing, is to establish spaces for learning and collaboration inside and outside the organization. And is webinars like this, or even what we do in the CFA societies around Latam and the Caribbean, that can make this point and this concrete action valid. So what did I say about establishing collaboration inside and outside the organization? Further in my career path, when I was doing my master's degree, I was asked to picture a female leader in my field. And after a lot of thought, I couldn't find one. This could be part of ignorance, but also I believe is lack of mentors. As we start to create a women committee in the Chilean society, we try to focus on many things, many tasks, and we see that we face still many challenges in the workplace: chauvinist attitude, imposter syndrome, but especially the lack of positive role models. Feminine role models, we need to be more visible. And from personal experience, I wish I had a mentor, a female role model that, oh, sorry, I just.
Maybe can you just confirm that you're still hearing us? Your screen is frozen. Okay, we'll give Mayville a few seconds, see if she comes back online. Perhaps there's some internet connection issue. While Mayville works to come back online, I just ask the panelists. So in fact, the participants, as you know, you go to different presentations, you can just, questions that you have for the panelists, you can just place them in the chat, so that once we get to the Q&A segment, you know, we can really just optimize that time. So Mabel has dropped off. Let's give her a, okay, she's reconnecting. So Mabel, thanks, welcome back with us. I presume you had an internet glitch, so you can just,
Oh, sorry.
that's fine, reshare
Me
it
now.
and then continue, because you had us on the edge of our seat as you brought us into your.
Oh, sorry. My computer just shut down. I'm really, really sorry.
That's fine.
Can you still watch the presentation?
No, we're not seeing, so you could just share again.
I will share again.
Yes, thank you.
That's it.
Okay, it's coming back.
Thank you. I'm really sorry for that interruption.
Not a
I was telling you from personal experience what was my thoughts. Sorry, sharing everything. And I was telling that from personal experience, I just really thought we need our female role models. So we need mentors. And not only when we just start in the industry as a financial analyst, when I came back from maternity leave, I really thought I could have like a mentor to guide me through that space. And even now, with more than 20 or with almost 20 years experience, I still look up to women that had made up into leadership positions. So I think it's really, really important for us to continue the collaboration inside and outside the organizations, and mentoring is one of the things we can do. What are the benefits from mentoring, especially from organizations? We have the visibility of minorities. You can target a group, especially women, and make them visible for all the organization. The retention of talents, there are studies that show us that talents that were mentored, especially women, stay in the companies for more than 15 years, 50%. Also, for organization, this made them develop new skills, listening and empathy, and putting your shoes into other positions made the workplace a more suitable environment and increase the sense of belonging, better connections, feeling that you are a part of a big organization, and knowing a lot of people make organizations better. What are the benefits from the mentee? Greater self-awareness, also developing new skills, communication, decision-making, talking to a more experienced person in the organization. It can speed up the learning process and could lead to more promotions. I think it is important to clear out that mentoring doesn't automatically a path for promotion. It's not automatic path of promotion, but instead it's a good investment in your personal and growth, professional growth. From my personal experience, what are the benefits of being a mentor? You can better understand your business, your sector. You don't only have to do mentor inside your organization. You can do it on programs that are already established that can show you the reality in other companies. So it's a really good way to be connected with the new generations and to what is happening in this industry. It's a better way to understand how people perceive you. When the mentee goes into this personal growth, you also look at your strengths and your self-awareness journey. So it also makes you create a large network, not only with the mentees, but between the mentors. It's really important for us to gather and to join with people that are sharing the similar experience, and that makes this network and these programs more richer. And of course, there's personal satisfaction to actively help younger women. So how we can do this? These are a few programs that are going out here in Chile. I have the pleasure to participate with Women in Finance for 2 years now in their mentoring program. This is a program from 6 months where you partner with women in the first 5 years of their career with the purpose of promoting their career, taking a look at what success is, and to set medium-term and long-term goals. This has been in Peru is the 5th edition of the program in 2022 with 35 couples, and in Chile is the 2nd edition of the program with 13 couples. And I think for mentees and for mentors, this can be a really, really good experience. It can make a really good connection, and as I told you before, a really self-aware journey. I also work in Banco Vice where this year we started a program. It's going to be starting in May. 40 women are going to be in the mentoring program, and they're going to have the visibility of other areas, and also the formation with classes and everything to make them like brand or their career expand. And there are also programs in Monedas management. Last year, they have like 7 couples, men, women, or women, to explore the program. And I'm sure there are many other programs I'm not aware of, and you can try to look in your organizations or in your countries where you can do this, because it's really fulfilling, and it's one of the answers, I think, to make participation of women more important in it as a theme, and also like an answer to that problem. So with that said, and I'm really sorry for the interruption, I think we need to take action. We need to start early with women. There are programs. I do also mentoring in undergraduates to show women and men that there are women in finance, there are women in investment management. I think it's really important to know the importance of networks, and I encourage you to get a mentor, to get a sponsor, or just become one. I think that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mabel. And we just thank you for bringing us into your personal experience. You had me just in rapt attention, and I particularly like how you closed off in terms of just play on mentoring. I think the audience will, if they don't remember anything, that should certainly resonate with them, and we look forward to engaging you some more during the panel discussion. So thanks again, Mabel.
You're welcome.
The next member of our distinguished panel is Yasmin Matos. Yasmin is a portfolio manager at Fore Principal in Mexico. Of course, she's a CFA charter holder with more than 15 years of experience in asset management, as well as developing and executing strategies to maximize portfolio returns for our valuable clients. Yasmin has achieved consistent improvements in performance for the last 5 years, and she has proactively led inclusion and ESG initiatives within our company. And this is a summary of Yasmin. And of course, Yasmin holds a bachelor's degree in actuarial science from UNAM. Yasmin, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to the CFA Society. Thank you, Diego, for sharing my presentation. I would like to share with you some overview for Mexico and also Latam and where we are in terms of gender equity. So in the next slide, please, I would like to share how the labor force participation rate in Mexico is developing since 2005. And we see really good improvements in terms of what we are seeing in women and also men, and also the gender gap. But if we go to the next slide, please. This is not enough. If we compare Mexico against OCDE countries and also Latam countries, we see that Mexico is very, very low participation workforce for women. This is data from the World Bank. In the next slide, please. So where are women working in Mexico? This graph I would like to share with you is it's about women or men that are working and are that are not remunerated, that they have no wage. If you see the purple region of the bars are women that are working at their homes, and of course they don't have any wage for that. So women in Mexico are very low represented in investment because in some way they are working more in their homes. On the next slide, please. So how much they get paid? If we look through the wage gap through different areas, if we see the STEAM areas and no STEAM areas, I put here a little square to share with you the business and management area and sector, and we see a very huge wage gap between women and men, and this is a very important developer here in Mexico that to be done. In the next slide, please. So if we talk about Latam, women in senior management are very if we talk about vertical representation, women participation in junior jobs is 36%, but only 26% in senior management. So women are more represented in sectors like human resources, communication services, responsibility, marketing, and only in services we have a 15% representation of CEO women. So we need to do a very work hard here, not only in Mexico, but also in Latam, as also Mabel and Kate just mentioned earlier. In the next slide, please. So what happened when women become a senior manager in Mexico? Well, we see a lot of drop-off women, a very valuable women when their careers increase or growth, and we only see 3% of manager directors in Mexico represented by women. Also, there are a very low percentage of women working in boards, and when we see a great participation of women is at the lowest level. 31%, which is the lowest part of the graph that I'm sharing with you, is the women that are that the firms that are reporting 31% of women working in the labor force, but at the lowest jobs. So in the next slide, please. What about financial services worldwide? This is a study of Deloitte, and overall numbers reveal that there's a lot more work to be done to achieve gender equity in financial services globally. As you see, only 21% of women of boards are represented by women as 2021. And also, if we see the CSOT percentage of women, we only find 19% of women here in CSOT roles worldwide. And this is a very particular develop of worldwide, because we see that women have a lot of skills that can be used to improve performance in all of the companies, but only 5% of women are CEOs within firms globally. So if we go to the next slide, please. If we look through North and South America, here are the current share looking in 2021 numbers. 21.1% are C-suite workers works for women, and the next gen is as much as 32.4%. We see here the projected share for 2030, but there's a lot of work to do if you see the numbers here. As Mabel shared with us, I think that there's a lot more to do in terms of mentoring, in terms of how can we develop women for the future. If we see the numbers of South America, the numbers are a little bit worse than for North America. So please, let's go to the next slide. So here are some thoughts that I would like to share with you. What now? How can improvement be done? And here are some ideas that I would like to share with you. In a report for the BID shared with us, published last 2022, they shared that they find that continuing training can improve the participation of women in labor force, and also to improve participation not only on the lowest jobs, but also C-suite, also boards, also CEOs, jobs, etc. Also, they find that if firms improve employment benefits for women, it could be better for women that are trying to increase or improve their performance through their career, professional career. And also there's a very good benefit for women when the companies are leading by women, and if we increase the women senior management, maybe we could see better participation of women through the firms and improving their careers. Also, here in Mexico, in my experience, there are a lack of infrastructure for women working and also in investment management. Sharing with you my personal experience, when I recently became a mother, and it's been very difficult for me to get managed my personal life, my kids, and also my job, because a very big lack of infrastructure for taking care of my kids and also going through work. And here are some ideas that I like to share to you, and also share to you that if we think with creativity, how can we see our jobs need to be done, we will increase the women participation in Mexico and also in Latam. Thank you, Hugh.
Jasmine, you're done?
Yes, that was very briefly.
Okay, thank you. So you got us warmed up and then realized, wow, short and sweet. Thanks a lot, Jasmine. And I just remind our participants, I see your question coming in already, but just keep your questions, get them handy, send them in the chat, and then we take it from there. So Jasmine, we certainly thank you for your presentation, and we also look forward to engaging you during the panel discussion, because you have certainly whet our appetite. Our next presenter is the lone Caribbean representative on the panel. That's Tracy Weeks. So Tracy is the manager at the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago. She's a CFA charter holder. Of course, she has experience and expertise in treasury, finance and investments, as well as pension restructuring and management and innovation in financial services. Tracy is focused on identifying, assessing, and recommending equity investments in ESG as part of the National Gas Company's evolving investment portfolio. Tracy successfully completed the online certificate in ESG investing with Columbia Business School Executive Education. And Tracy recently participated in a multi-video series titled New Energy Conversations, as the National Gas Company partnered with One Caribbean Media to influence and educate national and influence the national and regional landscape on topics such as energy transition and renewable energies. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Tracy. Over to you, Tracy.
Morning. Thank you, Hugh. Morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again, Hugh. And it's a privilege to represent the CFA Society Trinidad and Tobago at this morning's virtual event. I'm honored to share my insights on the theme, Women in Investment Management, Opportunities and Risks. Now, diversification is a central topic within the investment industry, right? It's Investments 101. So diversification ensures that investment portfolios are allocated across various asset classes. So you have your stocks, you have your bonds, you have your cash, and your alternative investment space. Could be hedge funds, private equity, private debt, etc. But you could also diversify across different geographical regions. So you could do developed markets or emerging markets like Trinidad and Tobago. You can also diversify across sectors, industries or sectors such as energy, financials, utilities, healthcare, etc. And you can diversify by market size, right? Large cap, mid cap, small cap. So why diversify? We know why we have to diversify: to reduce risk and avoid concentration of investments in any sector or any geographical region or any asset class, so as to not put all our eggs in one basket. So the investment portfolios are diversified, but why aren't the teams who manage the money or invest the funds, why aren't those teams diversified? Why do these teams lack diversity? So according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, women's representation in asset management industry lags behind the rest of financial services as of December 2021. So there's a risk that women continue to be unrepresented in investment at the global level. However, there's also an opportunity to promote gender equality in accordance with United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5, right? So where we could engage in diverse teams, attract more women to the industry, and therefore contribute to a sharing of different perspectives and possibly to better outcomes, better decisions. So better outcomes are also envisaged when ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors are explicitly incorporated into the investment decision-making. So now there's an opportunity for women in the investment field to ensure that opportunities that have a positive social impact are combined with opportunities which have a positive financial impact. And that's called impact investing. And according to the findings in the December 2020 article in Harvard Business Review, women consider social investing opportunities and do not rely solely on financial outcomes. And so by doing so, women engage in opportunities with an improved long-term financial performance, as ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors are incorporated in the decision-making. So I want to quote from the article I just mentioned. Missing out on female representation in investment and decision-making teams, therefore, is a risky thing to do. Should I repeat it? Missing out on female representation in investment and decision-making teams, therefore, is a risky thing to do. So let's highlight senior role models, exemplars in the investment management space in forums such as these. Let's engage in mentorship programs like Mabel just mentioned in her presentation with the business community. Let's promote the CFA Charter. So last week I attended an actuarial function. So I'm also an actuary. And, talking to the girls there, because they attended my alma mater, so we instantly connected. I took the opportunity to promote the CFA Charter Holder Program at that event. So let's promote the charter. Let's engage in opportunities within the within the emerging ESG space to collaborate as the world transitions to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So NGC, the company I work for, has a mantra: small steps to change. So let's take the small steps to change the gender equal investment management space. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Let's take the small steps to change. Okay, so as clear as possible, and I guess that's your call to action.
That's
and
right.
we also look forward to engaging you in the panel discussion.
Great. Thanks.
So our final panelist comes from a country that is near and dear to my heart. Of course, apart from Jamaica. I adopted Argentina in 1986 when Diego Maradona lifted the World Cup trophy. And I'm just so thankful I stuck with them for the last 36 years. Until
you've done well in the last World Cup. Yes,
until Lionel Messi lifted the trophy last year. So our final panelist, Paula Gugea, is an independent investment advisor out of Argentina. She holds a degree in economics from Universidad Católica, Argentina. Paula has over 25 years of experience in international financial markets. Paula began her career as an equity analyst on the sell side for Caspian Securities and Merrill Lynch. In 2000, Paula moved to Schroders, starting in Buenos Aires. And of course, she then relocated to London, where she spent 12 years as a portfolio manager under gray skies, I might add. Paula worked for 3 years with Alaria as head of asset management, responsible for local mutual funds and developing investment strategies for wealth management. Paula's worked for 2 years at Quinto Inversiones in a similar role. And of course, her crowning glory, she established Paula Gugea Investment Strategy, which advises family offices, private banking firms, and high net worth individuals. And so I give you Paula Gugea.
Thank you very much, Hugh. I always like to find Argentine fans. I mean, my country is a mess, but we are particularly good at soccer, so that's great. We usually have the best soccer player.
Okay.
I'm trying to share. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, some of my esteemed panelists have already shared a lot of information about the industries. I will try to avoid the overlapping and go, given that I'm probably the oldest in the panel, I would use my experience to talk a little bit about my experience and how things have evolved for women in this industry that I love. I found this data for Morningstar quite revealing, and it's the percentage of women being actually portfolio manager, that actually in the asset management or the investment management world is what I think the most fun position. And women really is 12–15% of the total of portfolio managers out there. It is very low. And what I think it's even sad is that a lot of that growth over the year has been in passive investments. That was, again, the active investments, as you know, is the fun part, and where you make more active decisions. And when you look at the graph at the right, it doesn't change a lot among countries, and it hasn't got much better over the last 5 years. So the improvements of female representation in investment management is quite low, and there's not much difference in the regions. And then these discussions, there's a lot of studies whether women are better or worse portfolio managers or investors than men. Once again, Morningstar has this data of fixed income and equities. There's no huge difference, really. And so, although there are some studies that shows that women run funds are in a higher quartile than the ones that run only by men. My conclusion about this is a little bit different. Is the numbers are so low, women are only 10–15% of the portfolio managers out there. So, you know, statistics is about big numbers. So we don't have enough data to make a rough conclusions. But to be honest, if we think in common sense, actually women are as good as men in all intellectual levels. So there shouldn't be a difference. So I thought it was a bit funny that men and women deliver similar performance. Diversity comes with no downside for fund investment. That was Morningstar's conclusion. I thought it was a bit funny and sad, the conclusion. I actually think that there might even be upside to diverse teams. And diverse, I mean diverse, not only women, but diverse in general. And that is a more research area where some of the benefits of diversity has been addressed in a lot of more industries than just asset management. And what the study shows in a more broad base is that diverse teams provides better innovation solutions and better solutions to problems. So that's great. And then when you approach the whole talent and not just men, you can access more talent if you try to include other minority groups in your teams. And I'm very grateful that actually there's this move of ESG in the world coming from all stakeholders. Investors in particular care about ESG, that is great. Companies care about ESG, that is absolutely great, because that ESG includes looking for diversity. So apart from very other important issues such as climate change. But some of the graphs I want to show here is that there has been analyzed the stock performance of companies that have more women representation in their management. And that's the first graph. And as you can see, they perform better than those that have low representations, because once again, diversity does provide benefits. And on the bar charts, what it shows that also when you involve women as managers, then the ROEs, or the return on equities, actually improve and they're less volatile. So for those people that like numbers, what I usually try to say is that diversity is a good business. Diversity is good. It's not only because it's the right thing to do, if it provides benefits to the organization and economic benefits as well, because you provide other angles of thinking, and that I think is always valuable. Now, I tried to look for some information about Argentina, and the data was very poor, and I thought that was very telling on itself. We are great at soccer, but not at everything. Data is one of our strong points. But actually, the representation of women in board members is only 14%. There's more women that are supplementary directors, but the main directors only 14%. and only 6% of the companies have CEOs women. This is a survey of 1,000 Argentine companies that are the ones with the highest revenues. And even the board representation doesn't give you a good idea. I will give you an example I know of a woman that was called for the board of a financial institution, and they had these meetings every 2 weeks, and where they also invited other management members, and not big decisions were taken, but they still did another small board of directors just among the 5 old directors that made the main decisions. So even when we look at numbers, we have to make sure that they are not wishy-washy, but they actually mean actual representation. Then I try to provide, I did this slide thinking of my 26 years of experience in fund management and what I learned from that experience and of the changes I've seen. First of all, I always thought that being a portfolio manager was great for women because it's one of the most meritocratic professions you can find because it's all based on numbers. If you have a good performance, it doesn't matter if your skin is green or if you're an alien, but if you have a good performance, then you will be paid a good bonus and the commercial team will sell your fund. So I always thought that being a portfolio manager where most of your appraisal is based on numbers was great. There was not color or gender involved. And so I always wonder why there were so few women that didn't pursue the career in finance. And I tried to find some answers. I think part of those are perhaps our fault, women's fault. There's a misconception that there's long hours involved in asset management in particular. And my own experience is that different from when I was a research analyst, that when you have earnings report, maybe you have to stay very late. In investment management, you just work the hours the market is open. Maybe you take some reading home and you wake up early to listen to the news, but honestly, I don't think there's long hours involved more than in any other 9-to-5 job or any other professions. So I think that women shouldn't consider this as a big obstacle. Misconception, particularly in America, that it's a men's club. I mean, when I started my career, in a meeting room, I would be probably the only woman in the room. Today in Argentina, it's probably the same. Only 10% of the attendees in finance are women to conferences or company meetings, funds meetings. I was surprised when I worked in London, and I left 7 years ago. I think it has changed by then. And you would go into a room and 30% would be women that were portfolio managers or very senior analysts. So the representation in London, my experience, at least in Schroders, was that there were more women involved. But it's true that there's less women studying economics and finance. And I think it's due to lack of positive role models than actually it can be done. And last year I was a teacher in a master's degree in finance in Argentina, and only 20 to 30% of the students were women. And I think that an explanation for this also comes to my experience in the UK. I have a daughter that studied physics, and she went to an only women's school. And when I went to her graduation from secondary school, most of the girls were studying STEM. So maths, engineering, that is not common and among girls to study those careers, but all of them studied really very STEM or mathematical or technical careers. And I think it's because they have very good positive role models in the school, and they didn't have any negative feedback that they couldn't do it or stereotypes. They were really free women, and it was great to see. And I think that also some of it is employers' fault. Some of the panelists talks about the recruiters should have no biases when they recruit for high positions or for promotions. And there are studies from Harvard University about unconscious bias, and unconscious bias exists. I think every recruiter should take this test from Harvard to make sure that they don't have unconscious bias when they hire or when they promote managers. And the gender pay gap exists, and it's getting better, but we are not there yet. And in Latin America, it's about 30%, 20%, and it's similar around the world. Something I think is very important is employers sometimes think the woman has this dilemma of family or work. I have 5 kids myself, and I develop a professional career. And sometimes the men assume that you cannot make it, but they don't know your reality or the support group you have. So I always, when some of the men in Argentina particularly told me, oh, women are not interested because they want to focus on their family, I usually tell them, ask them. In London, it's not uncommon to see a man staying at home and the woman going to work. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to be considered. And then I think that, particularly in Argentina, mentors and sponsors are not very common. And the kind of programs that Mabel was talking about should sound great for Argentina, for a country like Argentina. So from my own experience, the biggest difference I found when I came back to Argentina, apart from the jokes, the jokes about women at workplace, that I was surprised because I thought that was all history. The biggest difference is that the UK acknowledges there's a problem and there's a benefit for diversity. So they gather data. Some of the other panelists also talk about it. We don't have a lot of data in Argentina, and because I think they don't acknowledge the problem or they don't see it as a problem. The UK has programs in place and they have objectives and accountability. I work for Schroders and I've seen this firsthand. And most importantly, men are involved in the discussions and they're also educated on the benefits of diversity. So to finish, some of the ideas I have to improve the involvement of women in finance, I think it's key that the senior management is committed to change the culture. And what I mean by this is not like what I showed as an example of a board member, a woman board member that was not at the big decisions, was not at the table for the big decisions. So I think one of the ways to do it is to include diversity objectives in their appraisals and bonus. I also think transparency is good. I know that Schroders does it and other companies as well. They publish their gender pay gap. They publish their workforce representations and goals. And this transparency, I think, is very important as well. Having a program and tracking the program, people have talked about this, mentoring and sponsors, and I want to reinforce something that they said. I've been a mentor myself for secondary girls underprivileged neighborhoods in London. So it's also good to start at an early age. And also what I would say on that is that men sponsors are also needed because studies show that we women, we usually are not good at negotiating our pay, for example. And we usually need to tick every box until we apply for a job or a promotion. Men are more daring on that. So I think that the example of men is also important as well as mentoring of women, where we learned how to deal with our own issues and family and business balance. Last, support and flexibility for mothers. This has been talked. I think the pandemic was great in showing us that we can work from home and being good at it, being productive. And finally, from Hugh said 26, but I started working 30 years ago, and things are getting better. And the new generations, and I see this in my son and my daughters, are smarter than us, and they think in a more equal way. So I'm hopeful, but I still feel responsible for the women that are working today to help them to make their work life more rewarding. So I think we also need solutions for my current generations and the one below me. So this is what I wanted to share today. So Hugh, thanks a lot. I'll stop sharing.
And thank you, Paula. You have certainly made a compelling business case for why we need to put our hands on our behind this issue. I particularly like the contrast between in terms of your London experience and Argentina. 10% approximately women in terms of senior positions in Argentina versus 30 in London. So it gives us something to hope for. And of course, you ended on a very positive note that it's getting better. So without any further delay, we're going to take the questions from our audience, and I'll ask everybody's permission if we could just go 5 minutes beyond the scheduled closing time. There's just so much valuable information to chew on, as well as engage the panel. So the first question, which I guess Mabel and Paula might have kind of stimulated this question from Desiree. It says, could I learn more about the mentorship programs? Specifically, is the program done virtually, or is it like a cross country? So I'm not sure who wants to take that.
The program I'm participating in is called Women in Finance, and they have this program in Colombia. I think they're starting in Colombia. They have it in Peru and in Chile for the Latam community. It can be done virtually, but I think it's a lot of, it's more richer if you just meet with the people. I did in 2021, it was virtually because of the pandemic, but then in 2022, we started to have meetings in person, and it's much more, I don't know, in confidence, and it creates a better relationship. So I think you can do it virtually, but it's good to do it in person as well.
Thank you. Maybe Paula, do you want to add anything? Because I know you close off on terms of mentorship.
Yes, I mean, I also did it face-to-face. So that was very rewarding. In Argentina, unfortunately, I didn't find a lot of mentoring. I'm sure there is. I should do a little bit more research or join Mabel's efforts. So yeah, I'm sure every country must try to develop something, or I would go to the CFA in the country and ask if they have something going on or they know, because as Sarah was said at the beginning, CFA is doing a great job on that sense.
Okay, thank you, Paula and Mabel. So Desiree, hopefully that has answered your question. The next question is from Crystal, and her question is, what ideas do you have for improving infrastructure for working mothers in the investment field? So I'm not sure who wants to take that. Yasmin?
Yes, particularly here in Mexico, I think it could be valuable to find some places to keep your children when you're working on site. And also the thing that Paula said, that working from home is very useful for women.
Thank you, Yasmin. And there's a next question from Crystal, which says, given that some data may be wishy-washy, what other factors can we look at to ensure that companies are serious about this whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just try to make up some numbers?
Yeah, ESG also suffers from the same kind of problems, where it is questioned whether true changes are taking place or they're just trying to show a good face. Particularly in the case of women in finance, I think the numbers are already quite revealing, particularly in Latin America, whereas there's very few women in senior positions. So first of all, you need to improve that number for sure. So get women to more senior role position. with some of the things we have mentioned. But I also think that going a little bit more granular into the data, and that that the actual women are making the decisions together with the men. But yeah, apart from arriving to senior positions where you are decision making, and at the board level, I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult to call, honestly.
Thank you.
Can I?
Tracy,
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Tracy, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, so I know, as Paula mentioned, you know, there's greenwashing and therefore you're not sure what is real, what is not. And Crystal mentioned wishy-washy. So we use this mantra again, trust but verify. So I guess you have to kind of get into nitty-gritty and kind of do some work yourself, and maybe do a back of the envelope calculation and really verify the numbers, right? Because, you know, people, you know, it's sustainability, ESG, all these are buzzwords, and everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. And we want to ensure that people are doing the correct things and they're doing what they say they're doing. So we need to really kind of trust and verify that they are doing what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that everyone mentioned about the programs of diversity is that they have to be accountable and that they have to be tracked. That's for sure very important issue.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Changes here in Chile, they're introducing some when companies have to give numbers, and these are regulatory numbers, so they will have a lot of more information in the future to see what companies are doing, not only in sales and EBITDA, but also in a gender gap and pay gap also.
All right, thank you all for addressing that one. I just want to put one final question to the panel, and then, you know, we bring the curtains down. They looked at the IMF managing director made some remarks last summer, and, you know, she spoke about the role of public policy in terms of the governments, you know, mandating certain policies just to close this gender gap. So from your vantage point in your respective countries, do you think there is a role for public policy in just closing this gender gap faster, perhaps mandating a minimum percentage of women on boards or in senior management positions? Do you think there's a role for public policy in just moving things along?
Do you know, Hugh, I have strongly mixed feelings about that.
Yeah.
That's my starting point. I'm not very fond of quotas because I think we smart women can get there by ourselves. But as I show, I mean, improvements are so slow, and Europe took the route of going into quotas, particularly in board members in Europe, because they're not advancing. I mean, so you wonder, but I have strongly mixed feelings. I would like to think that, first of all, I want to push some of the measures we have talked here. I mean, I think that the transparency is good. I think that companies should publish their gender pay gap, what Mabel was telling about Chile, should publish some of these numbers and to make it transparent. I mean, that's a very first good role. And then, but apart from that, on a regulatory side, I have very mixed feelings about quotas. So I haven't made up my mind yet, sorry.
I would like to add some huge... Yes, something. I think that also as Paula, that I have mixed feelings with quotas, but I think public policies could improve in terms of education, in terms of the way the firms report their gender gaps, and also include measures that are equal for every firm. So in that sense, I think public policy could do better.
What I think, now I'm thinking it over, what I think policies can get better is by providing help to mothers, young mothers, in terms of nursing, daycare, and also improving financial education at secondary school where girls are involved. Those things, now thinking it over, those are positive steps that I would totally like to see.
I just want to make sure that even though we have the public policy, that we ensure that there's implementation, because I know we always tend to have an implementation deficit in the Caribbean. So it'd be great to have the policy, but if it's not implemented, then we haven't moved forward. So we have to make sure that they go hand in hand, that it's implemented along, that it's implemented and we move forward and we can get to this gender equality that we so desire.
Okay, thank you, Tracy, and you certainly have the last word. And I would just say that, as I listen to you ladies just dig into your deep reservoir of experience and expertise on this matter, I just can't wait for next year, just for us to continue this conversation. But unfortunately, we're out of time. So I want to certainly thank our distinguished panelists. I've certainly the better for just sitting at your feet and just hearing the unique country perspective and so on. And I hopefully you found the experience mutually rewarding. And so all that's left for me to do is just bring some brief closing remarks on behalf of Inigo. Inigo is the Senior Director for Government and Regulatory Relations at the CFA Institute. He's unavoidably absent, so he has asked me just to step in his very big shoes. And so what I would just say in closing is that we certainly owe a debt of gratitude to Sarah, who started us off, as well as your 4 distinguished panelists, and of course for our audience for staying with us for the last hour and a half. I certainly want to just also single out Diego from CFA Society Peru, who has worked tirelessly behind the scene to make this webinar a success. I want to challenge all the participants, just to, by virtue of what you have heard this morning, just intensify the advocacy within your country, so that some of the aspirations which we have heard of, that they will be realized. Now, the good news is that while we are pushing on the home front, we're not alone, because when you look at the IMF's last report, they have indicated in no uncertain terms that they're committed to working with their 190 member countries and external partners to expand the whole breadth of policy recommendation to just help countries develop policies that will support gender equality and some of the things we spoke about. So it's the expectation is that over time, some of these gender sensitive issues, we pretty much see some meaningful progress, because when you look at the data, it is very compelling. It results in higher growth for countries, greater profitability for companies, and of course, it leads to lower income inequality. So I just close up by saying this: let's renew our advocacy initiative starting today. Thank you for being with us. Wish you a fulfilling day, and we certainly look forward to having all of you when we renew the discussion next year. So take good care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.